Welcome to Sales is Not a Dirty Word. I'm your host, innovative sales coach Aleasha Bahr, the creator of the Black Sheep Sales Method, because if it's a fit, it's a fact, and there's no selling involved. If you're a service provider selling your own service who's ready to sell differently than the mainstream status quo and convert 8 out of 10 sales conversations without feeling like a douchebag while you do it, then this is for you. If you want to know more about the Black Sheep Sales Method, then go to aleashabahr.com. This episode is with Dustin Riechmann. Dustin's not your average entrepreneur, he's a serial one. And he's the brains behind seven-figure Leap Masterminds. His mission is helping passionate experts craft compelling stories that catapult brands to seven-figure success. And what attracted me so much to Dustin and what made me want to bring him on the show is he is one of the only people I've heard of who runs masterminds in a positive way that everyone has a good experience and gets results from. So if you're in this online high ticket industry, then you've definitely heard about masterminds, people buying masterminds just to meet people, even though the delivery of them is horrible, or there's a result promise that absolutely doesn't even come close to touching it. And there's just a lot of confusion about how masterminds should be run effectively, what someone should be expecting when they get into mastermind, what's worth an investment, what is not worth an investment. And Dustin has really mastered this and has a unique talent for it that seems to be important for anyone who's thinking about creating a mastermind, because it kind of seems like there's a message going around that if you have a pulse and an audience, you can have a mastermind. And that's why so many people are getting burned. So I'm really excited to share with you today Dustin's approach. So let's go. Welcome to the big show. Sales is not a dirty word.
All right. Yeah, let's go, Aleasha. This is not something I've been interviewed about very much. The primary thing I help people with is marketing, and I do a lot of stuff in the podcasting and podcast guesting space. However, the way I deliver the results is through mastermind experiences. And it's something I've become very passionate about, in part because of what you shared in your opener. The term's been bastardized to the point where the thing I actually sell on the front end doesn't include the word mastermind, even though I deliver it as a mastermind, because I think it gives a negative connotation to something that's actually super beautiful and super powerful and super good. So I'm really excited to unpack how to do this well and how to maybe find the right, experience for you if you're looking to plug into an actual quality mastermind experience.
Yeah. So, okay, I think that maybe a good starting place is what is not a mastermind that people think is a mastermind.
It's a great question. Yeah, I was totally prepared for what is a mastermind. So what is a mastermind? Very simply, is basically three or more people together solving a common problem. That would be like the simplest form of a mastermind, right? Where 1 + 1 can equal 3, or in that scenario, 1 + 1 + 1 equals 6, or something, right? There's this, the sum is greater than the individual parts. So that's kind of like the aura of what a mastermind is. It's like groupthink. It's collective thinking that produces a bigger result than any individual member could produce on their own. So what a mastermind is not, and some of the things that are sold now, when I say if I just say mastermind and you have any business experience, you might think, oh, it's like a bro fest where these guys get together and talk, measure their members against each other, and and they're meeting quarterly in some exotic location, and everything's $50,000 or $100,000, and it's always a guru that leads it, and it's basically a big photo shoot for Instagram, and they stand next to a rented private jet. Like, that's what I think a lot of people are like a mastermind. Or it's a year-long program, and you meet, maybe every week or every other week, and there's 50 people in it, there's 100 people in it, and again, it's led by sort of a guru type who is teaching you something and you're receiving it from them. Like, that's not what a mastermind actually is, but I think that's what a lot of people sell and call a mastermind.
Yes.
Therefore, people don't get what a mastermind really is, which I'm excited to like break down and talk about what makes an actual quality mastermind.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's the one that I hear all the time it's basically what you're explaining is group coaching, where one person's
Yeah.
just talking at people the whole time. And I think the other thing that commonly gets confused is a networking group,
Mm-hmm.
which is not a mastermind. And
Correct.
to run a mastermind, really, it's not It is about cultivating the right personalities, the intentionality behind it. That makes sense. But there's more than that. It's also this talent you have for facilitating the conversation in a direction that's productive for everyone. Because, in theory, like some people might be thinking, oh, you just get a bunch of smart people together and then smart stuff happens. That's not always going to be how it goes, though, right?
Right. Right. Yeah. So curation is job number one of a great mastermind leader, right? And so curation is having the right people in the group, and more importantly, not having the wrong people in the group, because it's one of these situations where one bad apple really does spoil the bunch. It can kind of ruin the experience for everyone. So you
Hmm.
both need to curate a good group and then be protective of that group and be protective of the culture, set really clear expectations, lead by example. At least in, I can speak about my own groups, the people in there have certain values like serve first, radical transparency, confidentiality. Yeah, this idea that like you're there to lift up others, and by doing so, you'll lift up your own experience. I teach stuff, like I have things to share. There's specific lessons I like to learn or share if I've learned as I learn them, right? But it's definitely not the Dustin show at all. And in fact, I was traveling recently because our son was graduating basic training. I was on the road. I couldn't be on a call. And I actually have two different groups for the 7-figure Leap Mastermind. And I just said, hey, I'm not going to be here. Two people stepped in, led it, without a hitch. And it was because they've been around it for a year. They're deeply invested in it. They have a deep understanding of what we're trying to accomplish together. And they're good leaders, and they are now trained to basically be good facilitators. And so curation is important, and having a common purpose and values. I'll probably pause here before I get into actually like running the mastermind meetings. But I think forming the right group and setting the right tone is critically important to having a great mastermind before we even get into the facilitation skills.
That makes sense because I've definitely been in masterminds where it feels like everybody's selling each other, which is a horrible
Yes.
experience. Sometimes they're encouraged to sell each other. And I've been in situations where everyone's just sort of like showing the best light possible about how amazing they're doing, and all they do is win. And it just feels like this waste of time that we're all sort of posturing.
Yes.
So that makes so much sense. And I mean, something that you said that really stuck with me is you were like, facilitating a mastermind is kind of a science. It's a science, but it's also an art.
Yes.
So what is like the art of it?
Yeah. So maybe I think it's probably easier to describe like an experience of facilitation, and then maybe you can ask me pointed questions. So it's really interesting about if you once the group is formed, and once you've got the right tone set and the right values, and you're stepping into a leadership role, then the facilitation picks up. And facilitating involves things like setting and enforcing clear boundaries. So if you say, hey, we got a hot seat session, Aleasha's got this, she's got 1 minute, she's gonna outline where she could use some help. And then anyone that's got direct experience with that was gonna help. And if we have any other time, then other people with opinions can help, right? And then like literally having a timer, like we do our Zoom calls, I'll set a timer visually on the
Mm.
screen, and I'll facilitate, and I'll make sure that that's happening. If something's kind of getting mundane or we're losing momentum, I'll interject. But what I'm really trying to do more than anything is facilitate peer-to-peer help and make it a peer-to-peer interaction. And it has a ton of benefits. Mostly, most of these people are smarter than me, so there's actually better answers in the room than me anyway, and that's why those people are in the room. But it also, yeah, it lessens the dependence on looking at me as having all the answers, because I don't want that. And it just creates a lot of intimate connections among the members, not romantically, but like intimate in the sense that people feel seen, they feel known in this environment. Like by leading with transparency and vulnerability, I have people reflect back to me that our group, yes, we're talking about marketing and sales and capitalist pig things, but they also say this is like my emotion. People have named it their entrepreneurial emotional support system or support group, right? So like they can show up and celebrate wins, but also say this really sucked, or like I'm really in this lurch, or I could really use advice because I like this thing happened, or my wife doesn't understand this goal we're pursuing. There's a lot of stuff that comes up in there that as entrepreneurs, and even masterminds aren't only for entrepreneurs, but in my world, working with entrepreneurs, that having that safe space and facilitating a experience that's worthy of that or that honors that is probably a better way to say it, is like super important,
Mm.
because once you break trust or someone feels like they can't trust the group or something, something happens in the group that they feel a little betrayed in some way, like you lose it. So I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is, a facilitator, you're holding a sacred space, and then you do want to point people to like common activities. So a common
Mm.
outcome. So for us, like what, just to give people really clear examples, we meet on the 7 Figure Leap Mastermind. We meet on a weekly basis, and those weeks have themes, right? So like it's not just showing up and chit chatting. Like there's themes and there's structure. And I think having the science of this is the structure, and then the art is like in the moment, like feeling out what people need. And you look like you want to say something, and like inviting you to say it. Not, I mean, not
Mm.
right now, but in the group, right? Like,
Oh,
so
yeah,
as a
yeah.
facilitator, you're observing kind of the flow of the conversation. But like our themes for the first and third week of the month for us are typically hot seat sessions. So that's a traditional mastermind thing. If people aren't familiar with that, you might also call it like a spotlight session. But it's basically someone gets dedicated time to express either an opportunity or a struggle or a need, and then the group, the peers, speak into them, ask them clarifying questions and give them suggestions, and then let them declare like, this is my takeaway from this is what I'm going to go do. Like that's a hot seat, is like, let's focus on you, use the group's collective knowledge and solve this problem, or tease out this great opportunity. The other times that we have in our mastermind is we'll do a what's working now call once a week or once a month, in one of those weekly sessions. That is like sometimes a guest expert, sometimes it's a member of the group being elevated, sometimes it's me, mostly it's not. And that's like, hey, here's a really important, smart strategy that's working right now in my business. So it's not like a big educational thing, it's more of like a case study, like here's what's working now. And then the last thing we do, we alternate different months, but we'll do either a facilitator referral session. So we do referrals, but it's like once a quarter, everyone will go round robin and talk about a who that they need in their life. So it could be a client, it could be a partner, partnership, it could be a contractor or whatever. And then I'm documenting that in a spreadsheet, and we're basically like feeding each other referrals, but not necessarily clients, could be. And then the other thing that we do that I'm very excited about, um, most months, is a genius session. And this is something I invented. I don't know if I don't know if maybe I subconsciously took it from somewhere, but this is like one member who's really good at something uses their genius to serve another member. So basically like doing a one-on-one coaching or one-on-one consultation in front of the whole group. So it's almost like a one-on-one training and giving of value, but everyone else gets to see it, which means they can give feedback on it at the end. It makes them much more referable, because when people like see it in action, they're like, oh my gosh, like I need that, or I got to introduce you to someone I didn't know that's what you did. Like that's amazing. And so we do that on a regular basis, and really elevates the status of everyone in the group. So that was a very long answer, but that's what we do in our groups. And then I have a whole nother accelerator group that we do completely different things, still in a mastermind. I can share other examples, but I guess, Aleasha, so I give you a flavor for, there's like the blend of art and science, there's structure, but there's also like emotional intelligence, and there's empathy and observation to be a good facilitator in an environment like this.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. I love just being able to say, like, before, in a mastermind setting, before, because I told you a little bit that I have a sales mastermind call every week. And I'm not the gospel on sales, I'm like, hey, what do you guys think? Like, how did that make you feel? Do you feel like you're wanting to buy from this person, or do you feel like you're not being heard? And I really want to source the opinions and perspectives around, because that's so, I don't know, I think it's vital to have a variety of perspectives and opinions. And especially if you're curating the group in the way that you're talking about, where it's not just like, oh, you have money so you're in the group,
Right.
which it typically people are like, I like joining masterminds because I like selling to the people in there, because I know they had the money to buy the mastermind, so I at least know that they have a certain level of financial qualification, which is probably the worst feeling reason to be in a mastermind and be with other people in a mastermind, in my opinion.
And it's often fake. So I've seen, I've got, and then I've been in this, around this for a couple of years now, and I've been in masterminds. I've gotten to hear a lot of chatter behind the scenes, and I tend to serve a lot of people who are like, I was in a mastermind, but I didn't really like it. And I'm like, well, come over and experience this. I bet it's different. And then they stick around because it is. But the things they tell me are like, oh, I paid 25,000 for this. I found out 3 weeks later that someone else got comped in at 10,000, and someone else, it was completely free because they had a name and they wanted to basically use their name to sell other people into the group. And so things aren't always what they appear, unfortunately. But yeah,
That's such a
just to
valid
speak to
point.
that, so the qualification is important, and I'm a firm believer of having people pay because when you pay attention. I think it is important for people to invest in it because then they will actually show up and make it a priority. But I'm not big into charging like crazy amounts of money, and I also wouldn't say that financial ability is the qualifier. It definitely should not be the qualifier.
Totally. Like, I think it can be one of them. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not trying to make it so you can't, pay your rent, and so you need referrals from the group to pay like, no. But yeah, I love that it's not the only qualifier. So, I think it's really important. What should people look for to know if this is a mastermind that is going to give them all the benefits that you're talking about, like a variety of perspectives, as well as support and authenticity and referrals and that type of thing? How do you know?
Yeah. So I think one thing we haven't talked about that I think is important is format. So what I described is what I consider a traditional mastermind format, where you meet on a regular basis, could usually nowadays usually virtually, and then like we do 2 in-person meetups a year. But we're basically meeting every week, and we meet twice a year in person. And I think I like that. That's why I do it. Right. There are masterminds though that meet quarterly. There are masterminds that meet in person only. There are masterminds that are 3 days in person. There are like my other main program, which is about podcasting. I actually call it the Podcast Profits Accelerator rather than calling it a mastermind because it's a 90-day program, but every session is a master. It's facilitated as a mastermind, but people aren't buying it as a mastermind. And the way I set that up is it's 90 days. You get this specific promise for a specific price with the podcast guesting lead generation. And then on day 91, people are generally like, oh my gosh, I don't want to stop. This is awesome. I love having this group. And it's like, well, the 7-figure leap mastermind is where this continues. And that becomes like my infinite problem of business building. Right. And so I like that structure for people that are wanting to offer this, which is like start with a finite promise, deliver a great experience. And it's way easier to say, do you want to keep it going? Great. Come over here to 7-figure leap. That's how we do it. But if you're on the consumer side, I brought that up because I think the first thing is being clear on what you actually want. Do you want a specific marketing outcome? Do you need like, or do you want purely a place to up level your abundance mindset? Do you want a place purely for referrals? Do you want a place purely for collaboration? There's a lot of different things that entrepreneurs need at different parts of their career. And so I think, first of all, getting clear on what you want. And then when you find options for like, okay, these things all promise the thing that I want, then I think the best thing to do is to get direct contact with 1 to 3 members and ask them what
Mm.
it's really like and try to get the real insight. And then after that, talk to the person who's selling it to you. And and here's another pro tip. If you go to the person or the person's like, hey, you should be in my mastermind, this is what it's all about. I would never buy one without them letting me know at least the name of 3 members and then say, I'm going to contact them. I want to talk to them. If they're like, oh, it's private, there's confidentiality, I would say that's a huge red flag because like if you came to me now, I wouldn't say like these are my members out in the public, but if you came to me like I'm interested in this, I'm like I'm going to check with them first. But as long as they're cool with it, I'm going to introduce you to John, Cassie, and Tony. I think that all 3 of them would be great relationships for you, and you guys can talk about if this would be a good fit. Like to me, that should be the posture of the host because they should be like, I would love for you to talk to our members. But if they're like, I don't really think you should talk to the members, until you pay, I think that's a red flag. So I think that's a really important strategy.
So that's so interesting because coming from a sales perspective, I would typically it's a red flag when someone's asking to talk to other people on your offer because it's like, what are you looking for? I'm not going to send you to anybody who's not going to say something bad, first of all. So, like, what is it that you're looking for? However, in masterminds, since it is so foundational, who is going to
Yeah.
be in the group with you, that makes sense to me because it's directly related to how the person's curating. Is the person who's curating just curating to make money for themselves, or are they curating with like the idea of the group benefit in mind? And so that is something that I wouldn't have thought about. And I guess it does make sense, especially because it's so intimate. You only recommend 10 or 12 people.
Right.
So it's like, I'm going to be with 10 or 12 people. Like it's
Every
not,
week.
it's not
And
Lifetime Fitness, where there's like
yeah,
hundreds of members. And so you need to Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's another important distinction. Like people say it's a mastermind, it's a 100-person mastermind, and it meets 4 times a year in person. I mean, there is no license not that I'm aware of on what mastermind means, but for me, a mastermind experience by default needs to be intimate and like trusting. And I don't know how you do that with 100 people that you see 4 times a year. People pay. I know people in them that pay $50,000 for that experience. I think that's much more about connecting and being in the room. And there's nothing wrong with that. That serves a purpose. But a mastermind, in what I consider the quote unquote pure form, is really elevating the mindset and results of the people in the group. And I found the best way to do that is to curate it in a manageable number where everyone really knows each other. So yeah, to your point, I totally get that. Like if I have a program, if I had a course and someone's like, I want to talk to 10 of your previous customers, I'm like, that's kind of wacko. Like, no, like the course has its own promise, there's a guarantee. You can read the testimonials. If you want to go find those people, I don't care. But like, no, that's kind of weird. But for a mastermind, I, I think that's a reasonable request, especially if you're committing for a year or something like that. It's like I want to know who's in there, and the way it should be presented, in my opinion, is not so much like I'm going to introduce you to John so you can see what you can get out of John. No, I want to introduce you to John because I think you're going to really serve him, and like he will be a good sounding board for how you're going to be able to show up and serve in the group. Like that's if I invite someone in, it's like because I think they can be an addition to the group. It's not about getting their money. It's about like, will they be a net positive to the group they're going to be in? And if so, I want them to realize how and make sure that they're prepared to serve in that way. Right. So it can be a little nuanced, but yeah, I don't think, I think, yeah, first and foremost, it should be relational. And therefore you got to know who the people are, or at least you got to have a sense for the values and the expectations of the group.
Totally. So, to recap, if you're looking to get into a mastermind, you want to ask how many members are there? How are they selected?
Yes.
And what is the structure of this mastermind? Like, how often do you meet, and are there themes, or are people just kind of like dealing with whatever's coming up in the moment? And what is the overall goal or outcome of it? Is there one? And if all of those check out, then it's a well thought out mastermind and not a money grab from the person creating it, which is what we see so much of these days. And if you're running a mastermind, you want to not just be in it for the money because it's not going to end up working out for you. I guess it has for some people, but I would say that's the minority of people. The majority are like, don't work with that person. It's a terrible experience. And I don't know, there's all kinds of like short term versus long term arguments to be made there, and ethical things and integrity. But I feel like that's really helpful information and a good stopping point for us. So, Dustin, thank you so much for making an appearance as our guest today and breaking this down in thoughtful detail. And I feel like it's really clear. And I hope this is helpful for anyone listening. And if it's your first time becoming aware of this opportunity, I hope that we saved you from making a mistake that a lot of people make when they join masterminds the first time. And if you've been burned before, I hope this gives you what you need to feel confident in moving forward, because it can be such an exponentially accelerated, quantum multiplied experience when done correctly. So, Dustin, can you tell everyone how they can find out more about you and how they can work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. One little final note: if you've been burned, I've been burned. That's actually how I discovered how to do this well. Was like seeing it not done well, and an exercise I did to kind of heal from that and make it an abundance thing instead of a victim thing is when I thought of all the things that experience had done to me. Where I was like, oh, they took my money and it made false promises or whatever. I had a column right next to it. It was like, here's all the things that did for me, and so it was like, well, it made me see how to treat people. It made me see who I'd want to invite and how I'd want to run it. And so if you've been in a bad experience, had a bad business experience or life experience, I've used that pretty frequently. Like that was bad, but like there's a lot of good things that came from it. And so anyway, I just kind of end on a constructive note. But yeah, if people want to check me out, 7-figure leap, like LEAP.com. Right there on the homepage, you'll get a sense of what we're all about. Our 7-figure leap mastermind is invite only, so you're not actually going to see that mastermind there, but what you'll see is the podcast profits accelerator. And that's where most people enter our world. That's the 90-day program about lead generation and marketing that is usually the stepping stone into the 7-figure leap for the people who really find that they love the experience. I'm also very active on LinkedIn. If you're over there, it's just Dustin Riechmann. I think I'm the only one in the world. So pretty easy to find if you can spell it right.
And everything will be in the show notes, you guys. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.